Pumpkin is one of those flavors that signals the start of the holiday season. And I love the sweet and spicy blend of a classic pumpkin pie. And this one that I'm going to show you how to make has an unexpected twist or two. First, we make the custard for the filling for the pie. Start with 3 cups of whole milk. We're going to cook the milk with a special blend of spices. A cinnamon stick, a vanilla bean that you can cut open like this with the point of your knife and then scrape out the vanilla seeds. Put the seeds as well as the pod right in the milk. Don't leave any seeds on the board. A vanilla bean has so much flavor, and scraping it like that really releases even more flavor. A nice piece of ginger. This is fresh peeled ginger. And 4 whole cloves. And about 10 peppercorns, black peppercorns. Bring this mixture to a boil and reduce by half. And that's the beginning of our pumpkin pie custard. So the custard base has cooled. Now strain. I'm using a fine sieve. It'll strain very nice and smooth. And you're ready to make the rest of the custard. These are your ingredients: 2 eggs, whisk the eggs together with a 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree. Now, most pumpkin, by the way, in the United States is used for pumpkin pie. So mix the pumpkin. The eggs act as the thickener for this mixture. Half a teaspoon of salt, 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar, the cooled, flavorful, spicy custard. All of this goes right into the pumpkin. That looks beautiful. And pour this right into your pumpkin seed pâte brisée pre-baked crust. This is a beautiful, beautiful crust, and the difference from a regular pre-baked pie crust is that it has pumpkin seeds incorporated right into the dough. Get this right into a preheated 425-degree oven and bake for 15 minutes. Then reduce the heat to 350 degrees and bake until the custard, this beautiful mixture, has just set in the center. And that'll probably be about 25 minutes more. So this is our third little tip for an unusual pumpkin pie. Sift 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar, super fine sugar, over the entire top of the cooled pie, and then torch it. We're going to brûler it. Brûler is the French word for burned. As the sugar warms, it caramelizes. You can see each one of those little bubbles melting, really burning the sugar. It smells good. So just keep passing the flame over the surface of the sugar until the sugar melts and browns. I think we're pretty much done here. But the whole idea is to get a crunchy topping on top of the pie. Hear that? When you cut through, it's really crunchy. So here you have a shiny topped bruleed pumpkin pie, an unexpected crunch to your classic holiday dessert. Enjoy. It may look complicated, this particular lattice, but I'll share my trick for making it as easy as pie. First, the pâte brisée. 3 3/4 cups of all-purpose unbleached flour and 1½ teaspoons of granulated sugar and 1½ teaspoons of salt. So the first thing I do is mix up my dry ingredients by pulsing. That's called pulsing, up and down, up and down. And then you can add your butter. 3 sticks of butter, and the butter has been neatly cut into 1/4-inch cubes. This makes it very easy to get the right texture of pastry by preparing your butter like this. And it's icy, icy cold. The golden rule of Pot brise is make it cold. Everything, the flour, the butter, the ice water, and then pulse. And then you add a half a cup of ice water. And notice how I'm pulsing and adding the iced water sort of on the outside of the feed tube. There. I think we have our pastry. Take it off, and with this much, I'm going to divide it into 3 equal discs of dough. You can use your plastic to pull the pastry together. And if it's a warm day, work as quickly as you can. Do not let this pastry get warm. It will not be the kind of flaky pie crust that you want. So there. Just place them on a baking sheet and put them in the refrigerator for at least an hour. So now for the filling, which is 3 pints of blueberries, the zest of 1 lemon, and also the juice of a lemon. The combination of lemon and blueberry is just spectacular. Very good for you. Half a cup of sugar, only a half a cup. Can't complain that it's too sweet. 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. Cornstarch will be very helpful in thickening the juices that come out of the berries. And a traditional spice is cinnamon for blueberry, or just a 1/4 teaspoon though. You can stir this up, and a little sprinkling of salt will also be nice for the filling. And 2 tablespoons of butter. Just cut the butter into little pieces and stir this all together. The butter helps enrich the juices that are being thickened by the cornstarch. It's a whole little method. And this is ready to put into the pie. So now I'm going to roll out 1 disc of the pastry to fit the bottom of the 9-inch glass pie plate. I think that is a very nice size for the pie plate. If you have difficulty lifting up your crust, the easiest I find is just to roll it on the pin like this and unroll it into your dish. And then don't use your sharp fingernails if you have them. I don't have them, but use the back of your fingers like this to press this into the dish. And then what I do is I put this right back into the fridge and chill it while I'm rolling out the rest of the topping. And now for the lattice top of the pie, just roll your dough into a square approximately 11 inches. And we're going to cut this into strips. Big pie day, you don't have to go to the gym. Get lots of upper body exercise. And you can transfer this piece onto a parchment-lined baking sheet. There. And get that into the fridge while you roll out the third. So here we have our chilled dough, and you cut this into 1-inch strips. There. And save your scraps. You might need them for something else. So you'll cut this piece and your second piece into the 1-inch strips. So now you're going to place this on top of 2. You're going to lift 2. So this is the beginning of your lattice. Then you're going to go under. It's basically basket weaving 101. And the colder your dough is, by the way, the easier it is to weave. So there, now get that right back into the refrigerator, chill it, then you'll put it on top of your pie. So now get your gorgeous blueberry filling into your bottom crust. Now brush the edge of the pastry with egg yolk. This is your glue. It's going to let the lattice adhere right to the top of the pie. Now this, we've trimmed the edges. Just lift this right on top of the entire blueberry pie and press all the way around the edges. And then with a pair of scissors, just trim about 1/4 inch from the edge of your pie plate. So now take your fingertips and tuck this under. Just make sure it's really sealed. And then brush with the same egg yolk to give a beautiful, beautiful golden brown color to the lattice. And I'm also going to sprinkle with sanding sugar to give an added crunch to this pie. Now your oven should be preheated to 425 degrees. Put the pie right in and bake for 20 minutes. And then reduce the heat to 375 and continue baking until the filling is bubbling and the crust is evenly browned. 60 to 75 minutes. So this is what the pie looks like when it comes out of the oven. Feel free to think outside the box by varying the width of the strips. The edges can be ruffled or straight. The choice is yours. The pie is beautiful. Enjoy. Maple syrup is referred to as liquid gold all over New England. Let's begin first with the crust for this pie. Use a little bench flour. Spread it all over your counter and make sure the crust is well chilled. And I'm constantly lifting and flouring underneath. You can also flour the pin. If it gets too soft, put it right back on a cookie sheet in the freezer and just let it harden up a little bit before you proceed. Now, to get it into here, just roll it quickly on the pin, lightly and quickly. And I'm using a glass pie plate. These glass pie plates are really handy. You should get yourself quite a few of them because as you give pies away, they disappear. And I'm trimming the edges neatly, leaving an overhang of about 1/2 inch. And this is going to be pre-baked, blind baked, the old bakers said. So notice I'm just rolling this under so that it is right on top of the rim. And another reason for using glass is that when you bake it, you can look at the bottom and see how nicely brown it is. Okay, so now get that right back into the refrigerator. Now the next thing is to make many, many, many of these little maple leaves. And I need lots of these. So I'm going to roll out another disc, get it nicely thin. Okay, so now start cutting. If they're not too warm, take the back of a sharp knife. So go like this, and you just have to do 1 or 2 lines, just to make it look more like a leaf. When these are done, put them right back into the refrigerator. And now we want to apply the leaves to the edge of the pie shell. We have 1 egg. This is the glue. And you can use a small brush like that, and you just put an egg wash all the way around the edge and on the back of each leaf. This will really help them adhere well to the edge. Doesn't that look gorgeous already? Now, when you finish, put this right back into the refrigerator and chill again. A beautifully applied edge. And now carefully brush your egg wash over all those maple leaves. Why do this? Well, it gives a very beautiful, glistening brown edge to your maple pie. Now make sure your oven is preheated to 375 degrees. One more step. Fold this parchment like this and like this. Point to edge. This will fit in, see? But better yet, go like this. Crunch it all up. This makes it go in even faster. See how nice? This is an assortment of red kidney beans, black-eyed peas. You can have lentils. Rice works very well too, although it's not as heavy as a bean. And they fill every nook and cranny. Put this in the oven, 20 to 25 minutes, and bake until it is all an even golden brown. So here's the crust. You can look at the bottom, gorgeously brown. It is ready to be filled. And the filling has very few ingredients. 1 cup of real maple syrup. Bring this to a boil and reduce it till it gets a little bit thicker than it is. In the meantime, we need 4 egg yolks and 1 whole egg. Save your whites. So beat that up. Add 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of the best vanilla. 1/4 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. Oh, this is the fragrance, the wonderful spice. Okay, so the eggs are ready and the syrup has reduced itself. Add your heavy cream, 2 cups. And if you were standing here, you would love the smell. It's so fantastic. Bring this back to a simmer. And now add this very slowly, whisking at the same time to your egg mixture. Warm those egg yolks. Then put this mixture through a sieve. Now make sure your oven is heated to 300 degrees so it bakes at a low temperature. Should be just the right amount to come up to the maple leaves but not cover the edge. Bake it until the custard is just set but still a little bit wobbly in the center. It's going to take about 45 to 60 minutes. So here is the finished pie. It is cool. That's a very pretty slice of pie. Forgive me, but I can't wait. This is the perfect finish to any autumnal meal. Pâte brisée, which is my basic pie crust, has no eggs and very little sugar. And the pâte sucrée has 2 egg yolks, and the pâte sucrée extra has an extra egg yolk. So that's what we're making. 2½ cups of all-purpose flour, unbleached, a pinch of salt, 1/3 of a cup of sugar. And I'm going to just pulse this a little bit. It's the same thing as sifting it. Using a food processor it makes this really, really easy. We have timed making it by hand and making it in a food processor, and I think it takes 16 or 18 seconds in a food processor, and it takes a lot longer by hand. Yeah. Maybe the butter is icy cold, 2 sticks cut up into beautiful cubes. Really helps very much in the cutting in process. I still want to have little tiny bits of butter visible. And then we have 3 large egg yolks and 1/4 of a cup of ice water. Beat this up a little bit.
Do you use sucré instead of brisée just for flavor? Is the texture preferred?
It's a little sturdier and tasty because it's sweet and pretty. It keeps its shape very nicely. And you can just pour this.
Now, can this be done ahead of time?
Oh yeah, you can keep it refrigerated overnight. Don't keep it too much longer. You know how pastry starts to get gray?
Yeah.
So, but look at the great color. And put this on a little bit of bench flour. You have to have enough moisture. You have to make sure it's not too dry. If it's too dry, you're going to have a really hard time rolling it out. Just divide this in half because this will make 2 9-inch tarts. And wrap this in plastic wrap, a nice flat round. So these will go into the fridge. And we have one all ready to roll. We have a 9-inch tart shell. We want it to be larger than the pan. Now, how do you get the dough from here to there?
Roll it onto your rolling pin.
Good. And watch what you're doing. See, it went in very nicely. And then with the backs of your fingers, you can press into the pan. I like to reinforce the sides, and that reinforcing means doubling down a little bit. I push this down a little bit like that, all the way around. Now you can get the excess off. Press this down like that, and use your rolling pin to just break it off. And that works very well. It gives you a very nice crust. Chill this for about 20 minutes before you bake it. So we have our chilled shell, looks good. You don't have to dock it because it's a dense dough. The egg yolks keep it nice and flat. We're going to blind bake. And a piece of parchment paper looks like I'm getting ready to throw it away or throw it at somebody. But just wrinkle that up. It makes it more malleable and it'll fit nicer into the shell. Have your oven preheated to 375 and add your weights. These are all kinds of different beans and lentils, split peas, and they make a very nice weight. So this goes right into the oven for about 20 minutes. Remove the weights and the paper and bake until it's a nice golden brown. Here's our finished tart shell, nice crispy brown crust, and it's ready to fill. You have to pit the cherries. That's the time-consuming thing to do. So best to try to find a cherry pitter. The best one, I think, is this German version. And the pits fall into this container here. But don't you love that? This goes like fast. Really great. Now this you can find in odd little hardware stores. You put the cherry right here, and you just push this down, and the pit goes into the jar, and the cherry is pitted. And then there's this one. I just want to show you all these versions because they're kind of interesting. This one, you put the cherry here, and you push down, and the pit comes out, and your cherry is done. So whatever way you choose to do it, 3½ cups of cherries. So cut these in half and add them to your 3½ cups. And now we're going to whisk the cream until it's nice and smooth. This is chilled. And add 1/2 cup of heavy cream whipped. This will lighten it slightly, enrich it slightly, and add a little bit of flavor. And I'm mixing that in. And now put this pastry cream right into your shell. Now you could chill this again if you'd like, but I'm going to put the cherries right on top. We're putting the cherries cut side up all the way around. And the stem end out or in, whichever way, but once you start, try to be uniform for the prettiest tart. So here, last cherry. And I have cherry jam. And then dress your tart. Once you do this final little embellishment, put the tart in the refrigerator, let it chill before unmolding, cutting, and serving. Chicken pot pie is, I think, the perfect choice for a cold winter night. Now, the first thing to do is to cook your chicken. This is a 3½ pound plump, nice chicken. It's sort of a little bigger than most broilers and a little smaller than most roasters. Now put it in a large stock pot with water to cover. There, that's perfect. Bring it to a boil and then turn down the heat to a simmer. It's going to take about an hour to cook to 165 degrees on an instant read thermometer. Another thing to get ready are the vegetables. 1 medium onion that's peeled and cut into 1/2-inch pieces. 1 pound of Yukon Gold potatoes. Look how nice and yellow they are. Now these two are peeled and cut into about 1/2-inch pieces. 2 or 3 carrots, depending on size, again peeled and cut into chunks, and 2 cups of rich chicken stock. And in this heavy casserole, I have 5 tablespoons of butter. And I'm going to saute the onions first for a little bit, then add the carrots, and then the potatoes. And you just cook until they're tender. Now, once that chicken is done, and you take the skin off and tear it into pieces, this is the size piece that you're looking for. Pretty uniform in size and well matched to the vegetables. So here the onions are just starting to soften. Add your carrots. And now add the potatoes. Oh, they are so beautiful. Get those coated with the butter. And so now after 10 or 12 minutes, the potatoes will be fork tender, as will the carrots. Add your cremini mushrooms. They're a little bit firmer than those everyday mushrooms. Aren't they pretty? This is a lovely filling, and it's made even a little bit lovelier by the next addition, which is 1/2 cup of cognac. Now, the cognac's going to deglaze the bottom of the pan, but it will also add a depth of flavor to the sauce, which I learned from an old friend years and years ago, that the addition of cognac to a chicken pot pie was just phenomenal. Let the flavor get infused into all those vegetables. Doesn't that look pretty? I love how it looks. And then 5 tablespoons of flour. Sprinkle over all the vegetables. Better to sprinkle than to dump it all in one spot, because this is what's really going to thicken your sauce. And you want to cook the floury taste out of the flour. So far, all the vegetables are still holding their shape, their color. You don't want to get them mushy in any way. Okay, now add 2 cups of chicken stock. Now the sauce will start to get thick. And 1 cup of whole milk. Add a little bit of salt and pepper. Bring to a simmer. And cook for about 2 to 3 minutes. Then you'll see the sauce thicken nicely. You know how sometimes when you buy those prepared chicken pot pies and there's hardly any chicken and you wonder, why did I buy this? Well, now you don't ever have to buy one. You can make them. You can actually, after you put the pastry topping on, you can freeze the whole pie before you bake it. And you will have a fabulous meal for you and your friends or your family in the freezer. And we have 1 cup of peas. The little peas I like very much in this. 2 tablespoons of chopped fresh thyme leaves. 2 tablespoons of fresh parsley. I use the flat Italian leaf parsley for this kind of cooking. And our chicken. And this is about 2 cups. Now it's nice and thick. Add the thyme. Add the parsley. And the peas. Very colorful, very healthy, very pretty, and fragrant. Those herbs really help. And then add your chicken. Now you can see why the homemade chicken pot pie is so superior to anything that you can buy. Look at all that chicken. Look at all the goodness that goes into the pot. Now season again with a little bit of salt. Of course, salt is good. And pepper. And our next step, fill the ramekins. Now this filling should be enough for 6 pot pies. And these are beautiful heavy-duty ramekins, which are intended for soufflés or pot pies like this. So put the solids in first. You can always fill with a little bit more of that delectable sauce. Now we're going to let them cool a little bit in the ramekins while we get the pastry ready. And we're using a pâte feuilletée, which is a traditional French puff pastry. And you can make your own. If you watched the baking show, Martha Bakes, you'll know how to make your own. But you can also buy pretty good quality puff pastry nowadays. This is a hearty, hearty meal. So you won't need much more than maybe a salad to start. It's very nice for a autumn lunch or a winter lunch or a main course for dinner. So just let the filling cool. Now, instead of making individual portions like this, you can make one large pot pie, which is also very beautiful. And I love to go to parties where one big pie serves a whole table of 8 or 10. So here's our puff pastry. Use a little bit of bench flour. You're going to need 2 sheets this size for the 6 pot pies. Work quickly because this softens so rapidly. It's filled with like 1,000 layers of butter and pastry. Now you can use, if you don't have access to a good puff pastry like this, you can use a pâte brisée, which is pie crust. And that works very nicely too. So that's number 1. Don't throw the scraps away. They can be used for decoration, for little paniers for the kids, just for little snacks, baked with lots of sugar. There, so now we have our 3 rounds. Remove the excess neatly. And don't squish it all together because you can really reuse this for something. That should go right back into the fridge. And now these cut a vent hole in the center. Put these back on a parchment sheet and chill again just until they're really stiff, and that will enable you to use them easily. Now our pot pies have cooled enough so that we can apply the pastry top. And here are the pastry tops, nice and cool. cold. Pastry rule, make it cold, bake it hot. Your oven should be preheated at 425. What I'm doing is applying glue, which is egg wash, just egg and water, to the edge of the ramekins. And you have to work really quickly to get this to stick, and then make a pretty edge around. You can sort of make it up. Everybody has a different method of crimping and folding. But there, that looks, I think, really cute, doesn't it? So work quickly, get all your pies done, and preheat your oven to 425 degrees. Before you get these into the oven, I would suggest egg washing like this. Then chill the whole tray again, just until the pastry is rigid, and you pop it into the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes. Oh, I love how these are crimping. These are crimping perfectly. The pot pies can be assembled and refrigerated, covered, for up to 1 day before baking and serving. They can also be put into the freezer well wrapped and kept for a week or two before putting into the oven. The puff has puffed, the centers have bubbled. That is certainly one dish meal that your family is really going to go crazy over. Chicken pot pie, a family favorite. So roll a half of a pot brisée recipe into a 10 by 13 inch rectangle. And I always keep a ruler in my kitchen drawer just so that I can see that I'm pretty accurate. So far this is 11.5 by 8.5, a little further to go. And keep turning your pastry. If it turns and lifts easily, it is a well-made pot brisée. If it's sticky, if it's tearing, it just makes it more difficult. So to get this into there, what do? Roll it up on your pin carefully, don't press down, you just want it very loose. And you just lay it right over the pan. Press into the corners, the sides. Take your rolling pin and just go across the edges like that. The edges fall off and you have a nice square edge to your tart shell. This should be chilled well before you line it with parchment and pie weights. And if you follow these directions, you will have a very excellent pie crust. You can put this right in the freezer. 15 minutes is all you need to rest the dough and chill it. And now, take a piece of parchment paper, crumple it all up. This makes it much easier to place in the bottom of the pastry. A big sheet unwrinkled will pop right out. Now add your pie weights. The beans hold the pie crust in the bottom of the shell, so you don't get a pie crust that has all kinds of convolutions in it, which would not be good for a filling, would not be able to hold a filling. So this is going to give you a very well-formed, well-shaped, rectangular pie crust, right into a 375-degree oven until the edges are golden brown. That takes 15 minutes. So just to be clear, the crust baked at 375 for 15 minutes. The beans and parchment were removed and the crust continued to bake until it's this beautiful golden brown, another 15 minutes. Let it cool before you proceed with the filling. If you're doing this for a holiday or for a big dinner, you can make this early in the day and it's ready to bake later on. Beautiful, beautiful pie crust. So now the filling. 4 eggs. Break them up in a bowl and add 1 cup of dark brown sugar. Crumble the sugar, dries out so quickly, so crumble. 1 cup with the eggs. Get all lumps broken up. Add 1 teaspoon of salt, 3 tablespoons of melted cooled butter. Every Southern cook has a wonderful pecan recipe, but this is a kind of a Northeast version. And the zest, the bright yellow zest of 1 lemon. You could use orange zest in this, and that's very nice too, but oh, I love lemon and pecans. And add 1/4 cup of molasses. The cup has been oiled, so the sticky ingredients will slide right out. And then another 1/4 cup of white or light corn syrup. This keeps that filling both flavorful and soft enough so that you can really enjoy it. Yep, it's coming right out. Stir this all in with a whisk. Look at that color, isn't that beautiful? And 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So that's the liquid part of the filling. Shake off your whisk and stir in 1½ cups of pecans that have been quite finely chopped. You can see the texture. They are, maybe less than 1/8 of an inch chop. And stir that up. This gets poured right into your pre-baked crust. And your oven, by the way, should be reduced to 325 degrees. So pour this right into your shell, distributing the nuts evenly. And now place your pecans in a diagonal design right on top of this delectable, sugary, lemony filling. And take your time because this takes a lot of time, but it really is worth it. Now these are the jumbo, unbroken pecan halves, and you do not want to use broken ones for this particular job. So just finish this off. And what's nice is that they just seem to fit exactly right. There. So this goes into the 325-degree oven. Bake until the pastry is a little bit more browned and the filling is set. That's going to take 45 minutes. Then cool and serve with freshly whipped cream. So the pecan tart has cooled. And you see it's quite sticky, so I'm leaving the bottom pan underneath. But it will cut nicely into squares. And on a buffet table, it is the perfect pecan tart. And now for a cookie crust. This is made out of vanilla wafers. And you can grind these up in your food processor. Get them very fine. Okay, so there's your very finely ground vanilla wafers. Add 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 2½ tablespoons of sugar. And stir in your melted 6 tablespoons of butter. So that's your crust. So simple. I know your family will love this pie. Let me show you how to form this one. So fun to make because it is a no-roll crust. Spread it as evenly as you can in the bottom of a removable bottom 9-inch tart shell. This is like a quiche pan, tart shell pan. And with your fingertips, just pull up about 1/4 of an inch thick on the side. You can make this crust in advance. And now to flatten the bottom, you can just use the bottom of your measuring cup like this and really compress the crust. You're going to chill this before baking. What a neat and simple crust. It goes into a preheated 325-degree oven for 12 to 15 minutes. And now the filling for the tart, 3 whole eggs and 1 egg yolk. And add 1/2 teaspoon of the very best vanilla. There. To this, add your dry ingredients. 1 cup of When I tasted this pie, I just fell in love with it. You can't eat a lot because it's very rich, but it is very tasty. Because really, there's not much in it except sugar and eggs and a half a cup of packed light brown sugar. Pack that in. And now this gets incorporated. And there's one surprise ingredient which gives a crunchiness to the filling that I think is very appealing, and that's cornmeal. 1 tablespoon of fine cornmeal. And add 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And one last ingredient, melted butter. 1 stick, 8 tablespoons, 1/4 of a pound. This is what gives the chewiness to the filling. Pour this in. Once filled, get this into a 325 oven, preheated, and bake this for about 35 minutes. This chest tart is done. Let this cool to room temperature and then chill it for an hour or so. And we have one that's already chilled right here, and I can put this on our serving pedestal. Oh, it's so pretty. Watch how easily the ring comes off. And that is your chewy chest tart. It's like eating little bars of the best candy. Today I'm making a traditional double-crusted cherry pie with a pretty polka-dotted crust. The pâte brisée, it's the same recipe I've been teaching you for quite a long time, but I'll give you a refresher course. 2.5 cups all-purpose flour and 2 sticks of butter cut into small pieces, and make sure it is icy cold. We want a flaky, buttery, easy to roll crust that is exactly the right texture. 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. And now pulse, breaking up the butter into the flour. Now iced water. About 1/4 cup will probably do. But make sure you have no ice, just iced water. It'll make a wet spot, and when you try to roll it, it'll just be a hole, basically. So as you're pulsing, add drop by drop of water. And you'll need, depending on the humidity and your flour, anywhere from 1/4 cup to sometimes even 1/2 cup. That was 1/3 cup of water. And have your plastic wrap ready. Take out half the dough and just put it right on your plastic wrap. And I use the plastic wrap to form the disc. And you can just flatten it like this. And your second disc of dough. So chill these. For the filling, 2 pounds of fresh tart cherries that have already been pitted. Into the cherries, put 1/4 cup of cornstarch. Cornstarch will help thicken the baking juices and really make for a perfect pie. And 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. And if you prefer, you could use a little bit of fresh lemon juice. And 1 cup of sugar to 2 pounds of pitted cherries. And then stir with a spatula. Doesn't that look good? And now, as far as rolling out the crust, bench flour your rolling surface. Have a 9-inch glass pie plate at the ready. And roll this larger than the pie plate. A well-made pâte brisée. It's always such a relief when it rolls out like this and doesn't crack and doesn't break and is just perfect. Roll up your crust and roll out your crust. Okay, so here we have a crust that's still nice and cool. Put your cherries right into it. So beautiful. And they smell extraordinary. So this butter, 2 tablespoons. It gives an extra richness to the juices of the pie. There. Now you can put that right on your baking pan lined with parchment because this is probably going to drip. And you can chill this until you get the top crust ready. And now we're rolling out our top crust. Again, keep moving it around on your floured surface. And this should be, again, just slightly larger than 9 inches. And for decoration as well as function, use a little tiny biscuit cutter. And we're going to do, I think, 9 little holes. And now we have to get that right on the pie. So we can roll this crust again on the pin and then try to center your holes on the top of the pie. Press the crust all around, right on the edge. And I use scissors, leaving about a 1/2 inch overhang. I love pie crust. So now, what I like to do is roll this under like that. We want to seal the edge so that the juices don't run out. Now, everybody has a different method for this crimping. Actually, a spoon works really, really well. You can use any kind of spoon to push like this, and it makes kind of a nice crimp. Now, do a little bit of egg wash for a golden brown crust. Don't put big globs of egg on the top. Carefully wash it. Doesn't that look pretty? And this will go into the freezer for 20 minutes. Put this right in a 375-degree preheated oven. Very important, on the middle rack. Now this pie cooks for a long time, 1 hour and 45 minutes, until the juices in that center hole are bubbling. I love the way these cherries look, and I would just embellish with some cherries still on the stem. So pretty. Enjoy. Vardaman, Mississippi is the sweet potato capital of the world and hosts an annual sweet potato festival featuring a pie eating contest and a sweet potato king and queen competition. That's how important the sweet potato is to the South. Now, a nice alternative to pumpkin, especially if you don't like pumpkin, you're gonna love sweet potato pie. Choose 4 sweet potatoes of equal size. I just make a few fork holes in it and get this right into a 400-degree oven and roast them until they are soft. It takes at least an hour. And while the sweet potatoes are roasting, it's a good idea to get your crust ready. This recipe calls for a blind baked crust. And it's a pâte brisée. It's been chilled. That makes it easier to roll. And we'll get it rolled out into a nice round without falling apart. If it's well-made pâte brisée, it does that. Work on a floured surface, and I like to keep churning the dough so that I'm getting a nice even thickness to my round. I like baking these pies in a glass pie plate. It bakes really well. This is a 9-inch pie plate, and once you get the pastry to an even thinness, just roll it up. This is the easiest way to transfer from your rolling surface to your dish. Unfurl it. I like to use a scissor just to cut off the excess. I leave about a 1/2 inch overhang. And here I'm folding under the edge so that I can nicely flute it. And if your dough becomes a little too soft, get it right back into the refrigerator. Just a little bit of chilling will make it much, much easier to handle. So you see that looks good. And everybody has a different way of making a fluted crust. But if you use your 2 forefingers and your thumb, you can shape your crust very nicely. And this crust calls for blind baking, which means we're going to pre-bake the crust so that when we get the sweet potato filling ready, we pour that filling into the crust and then bake it again. Use a fork to dock the bottom of your crust. This will help the crust cook evenly and prevent bubbles or eruptions in the baking of the crust. Chill it now. And here's that gorgeous, gorgeous crust, all chilled. Oh, and make sure your oven is preheated to 375 degrees. We want to line this with parchment paper. So I have a nice round of parchment paper. A little hard to put that big round in there, so I just crumple up my paper and now it will fit much more easily into the bottom of the crust. It works really, really well. And then pour your mixture of weights. I just use an assortment of different dried beans that I use over and over again as weights. And they fill all the nooks and crannies and do a very fine job of weighting down the crust. Get this right into your 375 oven and bake until the pastry begins to color around the edges, about 30 minutes. Then you're going to remove the beans and parchment and continue to bake until the pastry is dried out and turns a light golden color, about 10 minutes more. And our sweet potatoes are miraculously ready, cooled, and we will start making the filling. So here's our beautiful pie crust. The underside is a lovely golden brown. The sweet potatoes have cooled also, and we need 2.5 cups of sweet potatoes, and they peel very easily by hand. Just peel off the skin, which is loosened from the flesh by the baking. And we need 2.5 cups of potato puree, and you can measure ahead of time. This looks like 1 cup. Just put this in your food processor. And this is exactly 2.5 cups, so no problem. We'll just put this in and puree it nicely. So just process those potatoes until they're smooth. There, that's good. So that will go right into our bowl when we're ready. And into a large mixing bowl, 3 large eggs. Whisk those up. 1.5 cups of half and half. Your sweet potato mixture. Good, deep color. That's what we want. You might ask, well, why not use canned sweet potato? This is so infinitely superior and so easy. There's no reason to use the canned variety. And sweet potatoes are readily available everywhere now. As soon as you get this pretty well mixed, add 4 tablespoons of melted, cooled butter, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of allspice. So 2/4 teaspoons of allspice, and 3/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Freshly grated nutmeg, about 1/8 teaspoon. Fragrant and delightful. And the zest of a lemon, about 1 teaspoon. Now your oven at this point should be preheated to 400 degrees. And don't forget 1/3 cup of sugar. And that's the filling. Very similar to pumpkin pie. There. Pour this right into your beautiful pie crust. It should be just about enough. Right into the oven. It'll come out in about 50 minutes. Wait till you see it baked. Pie is baked. Cool it completely before slicing. Looks so good. Serve and delight. This delicious sweet potato pie is a Southern favorite that really can't be beat. Try it instead of pumpkin. It's sometimes called a desperation pie, a category that refers to pies made when fresh fruit wasn't available or money was short, but milk was plentiful because there's lots of cows. First, make the crust. Now, this is a pâte brisée butter crust, and it's been rolled out, the edges turned under, a double edge on the edge of the glass pie plate. And notice what I'm doing. I'm trying to make an unusual pointed pie crust. So what I'm doing is making all slanted cuts going one way, and then you just do a slanted cut this way, and those little triangles come popping right out, and you can do this in a matter of a couple minutes. It's so cute. It looks like shark teeth, even though there are no sharks in Indiana. So see, look, all done in just a matter of minutes. Very cute. What will you do with those? Well, you could probably roll them out and make a little jelly tart. So here's the crust. You can now blind bake this, and you do want it to be cold when you put it into your preheated oven, 375 degrees, lined with parchment, and your weights. The store-bought kind of weights or the dried bean kind of weights. We always use dried beans, which the first couple times you bake your crusts with beans, they smell like beans, but after 10 or 15 years of use, they just become objects with no scent whatsoever. 375 degrees. Bake it for about 25 minutes, and then carefully remove the weights and the parchment and let it continue to bake for about 15 minutes more. Now for the filling, the custard. Now see, we have a crust already baked. Oh, by the way, if your crust starts, the little points start to darken, just put a 10-inch quiche tart pan ring over the points and they won't get too brown. Half a stick of butter. We're going to make a roux first, and 1/4 cup of flour. This is your thickener for the custard. A roux is basically a cooked mixture of fat and flour, and it's one of the cornerstones of sauce making. So we just really want to cook the flour a little bit, 2 minutes or so, over medium heat. We do not want it to darken, just to get the floury taste away. And then add 1 cup of heavy cream and 1 cup of whole milk, 1 cup of sugar, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Bring this to a boil and then reduce to a simmer and cook for barely a minute or two until it really thickens up. So now we're going to pour it right into our beautifully baked crust. Be careful of the points, you don't want to break them. And you can just pour right through your strainer. If you have your husband or a friend, it would help right now to scrape out the remaining custard, but I'll manage. So beautiful. And get this right into your preheated oven until the filling is slightly set, about 25 minutes. Remove from the oven, cool on a rack, and don't serve until it is completely cool. So it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm really desperate for a piece of pie. I need a pick-me-up. What could be better than a piece of desperation pie, where indeed the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Look how nicely Indiana cream pie, Hoosier pie, desperation pie. It's so cute and so delicious. Try it. I think you'll really like it. It all began with the creative use of a crunchy rice cereal combined with a mixture of butter, brown sugar, and almonds. And that crust is just pressed into a pie plate, and it looks just like a crumb crust. So it's very easy to make. 3 cups of gluten-free rice cereal, and it says it right on the box, gluten-free. 1/4 cup plus a tablespoon of light brown sugar. 1/2 cup of almonds. They can be raw almonds that are sliced or whole. Either will work. And 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And butter, 5 tablespoons of butter, which I'll add. I'm going to grind this up a little bit first. When you're grinding almonds or any kind of nuts, make sure that your blade of your food processor is sharp. And now add your butter, 5 tablespoons of melted butter. So that looks good. And now this can be just dumped right into, I like using glass because I can see if the bottom of the crust is well made. Well baked, I should say. And this is a 9-inch glass pie plate. And spread this into an even layer, a little thicker on the outside than in the center. And you can use the back of your hand, your fingers if you like. That's how we always used to do it until we found out that pressing with a little metal cup measure works very well and quickly. This can just press your crust into a nice even layer. Look how nice, this works so well. And preheat your oven to 375 degrees. Try to make the sides all equal thickness and just pop this into your oven and make the filling. Takes about 12 minutes. And now for the pumpkin filling, the spicy pumpkin filling, 1.5 cups of pumpkin puree. This can be homemade. Of course, it can also be canned. Pumpkin is one of the nicest foods that you can get out of a can. 3 eggs, and whisk the eggs into the pumpkin. It's a custardy filling, very similar to a traditional pumpkin pie. You can also use any number of squashes for this pie too. Instead of pumpkin, you could use the wonderful butternut squash, acorn squash, kabocha squash. They all make very nice pie fillings. And 3/4 of a cup of light brown sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, some cornstarch, about a tablespoon will do, just in case your squash is a little wet, a pinch of cloves, and some cinnamon, 1 teaspoon. Also, my favorite, nutmeg. Just about 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. So stir this up. Brown sugar gets lumpy and dry really fast, which is why we keep it in a sealed container. And it'll be very hard to break up if it gets too dry. So you can just add this right to your pumpkin. And now add 1 cup of milk, whole milk. Some people might use cream, but the milk works very nicely. Make sure that your oven is set to 325 degrees. But you can see it's nice and silky smooth. Get this right into your pie crust. This rice crust, which is gluten-free, can be used with a filling of cream, of chiffon or custard. Chocolate is very good. You can experiment, but it's a very nice crust to have on hand when you want to make a delicious pie. There, get that right into your oven. It's going to take about 50 to 55 minutes. So for the topping for this delicious pumpkin pie, we're not done. Yogurt, 3 cups of yogurt, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, and 3 tablespoons of honey. And this you just dollop right on top. Use a nice thick yogurt, like a Greek style. So just spoon this right on top. You want to just cover the whole pie with your yogurt. Looks so beautiful. And you can just put this back into the fridge to chill a little bit until you're ready to serve. And there you have a spicy, gluten-free pumpkin pie.